A tea. My wedding reception saw my mother-in-law slip something into my glass when no one was watching. She thought I'd drink tea. But I switched our glasses, and when she raised the toast, I smiled. That's when the real wedding drama began. I saw her hand hover over my champagne glass for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds. That changed everything. The crystal flute sat on the head table, waiting for the toast, waiting for me to lift it to my lips and drink whatever my new mother-in-law had just slipped inside. The small white pill dissolved quickly, leaving barely a trace in the golden bubbles. Caroline didn't know I was watching. She thought I was across the reception hall laughing with my bridesmaids, lost in the joy of my wedding day. He thought she was alone. He thought she was safe. But I saw everything. My heart hammered against my bent ribs as I watched her glance around, nervously. Her manicured fingers trembling as she pulled them away from my glass. A small, satisfied smile curved her lips. The kind of smile that made my blood turn to ice. I didn't think. I just moved. By the time Caroline returned to her seat, smoothing down her expensive silk dress and painting on her mother of the groom's smile, I had already made the switch. My glass sat in front of her chair now. Her glass, the clean one, waited for me. When Dylan stood up, handsome in his tailored tuxedo, and raised his champagne for the first toast of our married life, I felt like I was watching everything through a fog. His words about love and forever echoed strangely in my ears. His mother stood beside him, beaming, lifting the drugged champagne to her lips. I should have stopped her. I should have screamed, knocked the glass away, exposed her right there in front of everyone. But I didn't. I wanted to see what she had planned for me. I wanted proof. I wanted everyone to want it, see who Caroline really was beneath that perfect charitable pillar of the community mask she wore. So, I watched my mother-in-law drink the poison she prepared for me, and then all hell broke loose. The morning of my wedding, I woke up believing in fairy tales. Some light streamed through the windows of the clear bridal suite at the Rosewood estate, painting everything in soft gold. The best friend Julia was already awake, hanging my dress. A gorgeous ivory gown, with delicate lace sleeves near the window where it caught the light. "Today's the day, Lori," she whispered, her eyes shining. "You're marrying Dylan." I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. My Dylan. After 3 years of dating, we were finally doing this. Finally, becoming husband and wife. "I can't believe it's real," I said, pressing my hands to my stomach where butterflies had taken up permanent residence. My mother rushed, and then her hair already done, makeup perfect, holding a tray of coffee and pastries. "My beautiful girl," she said, setting the tray down and pulling me into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you." My younger sister Emma bounced in behind her, squealing. "The flowers just arrived and they're gorgeous. Lori, everything is perfect." Everything was perfect. Or so I thought. The ceremony went off without a hitch. I walked down the aisle on my father's arm. His eyes wet with tears. He tried to hide. The historic chapel was decorated with thousands of white roses and soft candlelight. Dylan stood at the altar looking like every dream I'd ever had, his dark hairstyle perfectly, his gray eyes locked on mine with such intensity that I forgot how to breathe when he lifted my veil and whispered, "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." I believe this was the beginning of my happily ever after. His best friend, Thomas, stood beside him as best man, grinning. Dylan's younger brother, Andrew, just 19, looked uncomfortable in his tux, but smiled warmly at me. I'd always gotten along well with Andrew. Caroline sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, playing the role of emotional mother of the groom to perfection. Dylan's father, Robert, sat stiff and formal beside her, his expression unreadable as always. We said our vows. We exchanged rings. We kissed, while everyone cheered. I should have known it was too perfect to last. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, a stunning space with soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and 4 toe-sailing windows overlooking manicured gardens. 300 guests filled the room, friends, family, colleagues, distant relatives I barely knew. The first hour was magical. Dylan and I had our first dance to At Last by Etta James. I danced with my father while he cried openly. Dylan danced with his mother while she smiled that tight, controlled smile she always wore. I was talking with Julia and my cousin Rachel near the dance floor when I first felt the prickle of unease on the back of my neck. That strange sixth sense that tells you someone is watching you. I turned and caught Caroline staring at me from across the room, not the warm look of a clear, new mother-in-law, and calculating. The moment our eyes met, her expression shifted into a pleasant smile. She raised her champagne glass slightly in my direction as if toasting me. I forced myself to smile back. But my stomach twisted. "You okay?" Julia asked, touching my arm. "Fine," I lied. "Just overwhelmed. Happy. Overwhelmed." But I wasn't fine. Something felt wrong, though I couldn't name it. Caroline had never exactly welcomed me into the family. From the moment Dylan first introduced us 2 years ago, she'd been cool, polite, but distant. She never said anything outright cool. But there were 1,000 small cuts. Comments about my teaching job not being prestigious enough. Questions about my family background that felt more like interrogations. Suggestions that Dylan might want to keep his options open since he was still so young. Dylan always brushed it off. "Mom's just protective," he'd say. "She'll come around." He never did. The weeks leading up to the wedding had been tense. Caroline had opinions about everything. The venue too modest, my dress too simple, the guest list too many of my relatives, not enough of hers. She'd tried to take over the planning entirely, suggesting we postpone and do when it right with her party planner, her caterer, her vision. I'd stood my ground. This was my wedding, mine, and Dylan's. She'd smiled tightly and said, "Of course, dear. Whatever you think is best." But her eyes had been ice. Now, watching her move through the crowd at my reception, perfectly dressed in a designer gown, perfectly coiffed, perfectly composed, I felt that unease growing stronger. "Time for toast soon," Emma said, appearing at my elbow with a fresh champagne glass. "You ready?" I whipped, took the glass, the crystal cool in my hand. Ready as I'll ever be. The champagne flutes had been arranged on the head table earlier, set up by the catering staff. One for me, one for Dylan, one for each member of the wedding party, and one for each parent, giving a toast. I set my glass down at my designated seat, and went to fix makeup in the bridal suite. Julia came with me, chattering about how perfect everything was. How handsome Dylan looked. How romantic the ceremony had been. When we returned to the ballroom, 15 minutes later, the DJ was announcing that toasts would begin shortly. Guests were finding their seats. The energy in the room shifted, everyone anticipating the speeches. I was halfway across the ballroom laughing at something Julia said when I saw her. Caroline standing at the head table alone. Her back was to me, but I could see her arm extended, her hand hovering over the champagne glasses. I stopped walking, my heart suddenly pounding. What was she doing? He glanced left, then right, making sure no one was watching. Then her hand moved quickly. Something small and white dropping from her fingers into one of the glasses. My glass. I could tell by the position. Third from the left, exactly where I'd set it down. The pill dissolved almost instantly in the clyde bubbles. Caroline pulled her hand back, smoothed her dress, and turned away, heading back toward her table with quick, purposeful steps. My entire body went cold. Julia was still talking, oblivious. "And did you see how your dad, it was crying? It was so sweet." "Hold on," I interrupted, my voice strange and distant in my own ears. I walked toward the head table slowly, my mind racing. Had I really just seen what I thought I'd seen? Was Caroline really capable of something like that? But I knew what I'd witnessed. There was no mistaking it. The question was, what did I do about it? I could scream, make a scene, accuse her in front of everyone. But what if I was wrong? What if it had been something innocent? A breath meant that accidentally fell or some kind of supplement she was putting in her own drink, and I'd miscounted the glasses, though I knew what I'd seen. The furtive glances, the deliberate drop, the quick escape. She put something in my drink, but why? What was it? A sedative to embarrass me? Something to make me sick? Or worse? My hands were shaking as I approached the head table. The glasses stood in a neat row, golden and innocent looking. Which one was poison now? I tried to remember the exact position. Third, from the left, my glass. I looked around. No one was paying attention to me. The DJ was queuing up music. Guests were chatting. Dylan was across the room, talking to his college roommate. I had maybe 30 seconds before the toast started. My hand reached out. Trembling, I picked up the third glass from the left. My glass and moved to the right side of the table where Caroline would stand for her toast. I picked up her glass and placed it exactly where mine had been. Then I set the drug glass down where Caroline's had been. My heart hammered so hard I thought I might pass out. What was I doing? This was insane. Swiss. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats, the DJ announced. We're about to begin the toasts. I jumped, nearly spilling the champagne. Quickly, I moved away from the table, my legs shaking. Julia grabbed my hand. Come on, you need to sit down. I let her pull me to my seat at the head table. Dylan slid into the chair beside me, grinning his hand. Finding mine under the table. Ready for this? He asked. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. My father stood, first, unfolding a piece of paper with shaking hands. He made a beautiful speech about watching me grow up, about how proud he was, about how Dylan better take care of his little girl, or answer to him. Everyone laughed. I tried to smile, but my eyes kept drifting to the champagne glass sitting in front of Caroline's designated spot. What had I done? My mother spoke next, crying happy tears, talking about love and marriage, and partnership. I barely heard the plashed words. Then Thomas stood making jokes about Dylan's bachelor days and offering marriage advice he was clearly unqualified to give. More laughter, more clinking glasses. Finally, Caroline rose. She was elegant and composed, her champagne glass in one perfectly manicured hand. Her smile was gracious as she looked around the room. Thank you all for being here, she began, her voice smooth and practiced. Today, we celebrate not just a marriage but the joining of two families. My throat was dry. I couldn't swallow. Dylan has always been my pride and joy, Caroline continued. My firstborn, my brilliant, handsome, successful boy. She looked at Dylan with such genuine affection that for a moment I wondered if I'd imagined everything. Maybe she did love him. Maybe she wanted him to be happy. But then her eyes slid to me, and I saw it again. What? That cold, hard glint. Lori, she said, and my name sounded wrong in her mouth. Welcome to our family. I hope you'll be very happy. The pause before happy was deliberate, loaded. She raised her glass. To the bride and groom. To the bride and groom, the room echoed. I raised my glass with trembling hands. Dylan raised his, beaming at everyone. Caroline brought the champagne to her lips and drank deeply. I watched frozen as she swallowed once, twice. She lowered the mid glass, that same satisfied smile on her face. Nothing happened. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe it hadn't been poison, or maybe not enough to matter. Or then Caroline blinked, heart like something had surprised her. Dylan was standing now, giving his own toast. Something about loving me from the moment we met, about building a life together, about forever. I couldn't focus on his words. I was watching his mother. Caroline had set down her glass. Her hand went to her forehead, pressing lightly. She swayed slightly, catching herself on the back of her chair. Robert, her husband, touched her elbow. Caroline, I'm fine, she said, but her voice sounded strange. Thick. Dylan finished his toast. Everyone drank. I brought the champagne to my lips, but didn't swallow. Just let it wet my mouth before setting the glass down. The DJ put on music. Conversations resumed. Dinner would be served soon. I was watching Caroline like a hawk. She was still standing, but something was definitely wrong. Her eyes had a glazed quality. She was smiling, but it was too wide, too loose. Caroline, perhaps you should sit down, Robert said quietly, trying to guide her to her chair. No, she said loudly, shaking him off. Several people nearby turned to look. No, I feel wonderful. And then she laughed. It wasn't her normal controlled, society lady laugh. It was high-pitched and wild, almost manic. Dylan frowned. Mom, Dylan. She turned to him, stumbling slightly, grabbing the table for support. Pie. Beautiful boy. Did I ever tell you how proud I am of you? You just did, Mom, in your toast, did I? Another laugh. Well, I am so proud. She was getting louder. More people were staring. Now. Robert stood, his face wreathing. Caroline, that's enough. Let's get some air. I don't need air. Caroline announced to the entire ballroom. I need to dance. And before anyone could stop her, she kicked off her expensive heels. And ran. Actually ran onto the dance floor. The DJ was playing a slow song. Caroline started dancing like she was at a nightclub, arms in the air, hips swaying wildly, completely out of rhythm with the music. The room went silent, except for the music and Caroline's laughter. Oh my God. Dylan briefed, beside me. I couldn't move. I could only watch in horror as my mother-in-law, always so controlled, so proper, so concerned with appearances, made an absolute spectacle of herself. Everybody dance, she shouted, spinning in circles, her perfectly styled hair coming loose from its pins. Andrew appeared at our table. His young face pale. What's wrong with Mom? I don't know, Dylan said, standing. I'll go get her. He started toward the dance floor. But Caroline saw him coming and ran the other way, giggling like a child. Can't catch me, she say out. Guests were pulling out their phones, now recording. I saw flashes going off, social media posts being uploaded in real time. Dylan caught up to his mother and grasped her arm gently. Mom, you need to sit down. You're not feeling well. I feel amazing, she insisted. But her words were slurring now. Better than I felt in years. She pulled away from him and stumbled toward the dessert table where our wedding cake stood. A beautiful 5-tier masterpiece covered in sugar flowers that had cost more than my car. Mom? No, Dylan started, but Caroline had already reached the cake. She stood before it, swaying her eyes, wide and unfocused. So beautiful, she slurred. Then she reached out and grabbed a handful of cake from the bottom tier. Dylan shouted. Caroline shoved the cake into her mouth, frosting smearing across her face. Then, she laughed again and grabbed more, throwing it. A chunk of cake and frosting hit a nearby guest. Someone screamed. That's when total chaos erupted. Robert and Dylan both rushed forward, trying to pull Caroline away from the cake. She fought them, still laughing, still grabbing handfuls of gone, destroyed wedding cake. Guests were standing now, some rushing forward to help, others backing away in shock. Cameras flashed continuously. Someone called 911. I heard my mother shout. The room spun around me. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to process what I was seeing. Caroline had collapsed now, sitting in a pile of ruined cake, her expensive dress covered in frosting and flowers. She was still giggling, but the sound was weaker now. Her eyes were rolling back in her head. Caroline. Robert was on his knees beside her, his hands shaking. What's wrong with you? What did you take? Nothing. She mumbled. The word barely coherent. Didn't take anything. Dylan looked back at me then, his face a mask of confusion and fear. Our eyes met across the chaotic ballroom. I stood up slowly, my legs barely holding me. What had I done? Julia appeared at my side. Bori. What's happening? Is she having a stroke or something? I don't know, I whispered, but I did know. I knew exactly what was happening. Caroline was experiencing whatever she'd planned for me. The paramedics arrived within minutes. They loaded a barely conscious Caroline onto a stretcher while the entire wedding reception watched in stunned silence. Robert climbed into the ambulance with her. Dylan stood in the middle of the destroyed reception, covered in cake frosting, looking lost. I walked to him on shaking legs. Dylan, he turned to me, his eyes wet. I don't understand. He barely drinks. I've never seen her like that. We should go to the hospital, I said quietly. He nodded, numb. The reception was over. Guests were leaving, whispering to each other, phones still out, probably posting about the most dramatic wedding reception of the century. My perfect day had turned into a nightmare. But it wasn't my nightmare. It was Caroline's. And, somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered, she deserved it. He did this to herself. But as I watched my new husband break down in tears, I wondered if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. The hospital waiting room smelled like antiseptic and bad coffee. I sat beside Dylan, still in my wedding dress, the delicate lace, now feeling like a costume from another life. My mother sat on my other side, holding my hand. My father paced nearby. Julia had gone home to get me a change of clothes. Dylan hadn't spoken in over an hour. He just sat there, elbows on his knees, head in his hands, still wearing his tuxedo with cake frosting dried on the sleeve. Andrew sat across from us, his young face drawn and worried. Robert had disappeared into Caroline's examination room and hadn't returned. I kept playing it over and over in my mind. Caroline's hand hovering over my glass, the white pill dropping. My decision to switch the glasses. I should tell someone. I should tell Dylan. But every time I opened my mouth, fear choked the words back down. What if he didn't believe me? What if he thought I was lying? Trying to blame his mother for my own mistake? What if this destroyed our marriage before it even really began? Family of Caroline, Ashford. We all jumped up as a doctor in a white coat approached, a clipboard in hand. How is she? Robert appeared from somewhere, his face haggard. The doctor looked around at all of us, his expression serious. She's stable now, but I need to ask you some questions. Did your wife take any medications today? Anything unusual? Robert shook his head. No, nothing. She doesn't take anything except vitamins. Does she drink alcohol regularly? Rarely. A glass of wine at dinner sometimes. The doctor made a note. We ran a toxicology screen. Mrs. Ashford has a significant amount of diazepam in her system. Does she have a prescription for that? Diazepam. Robert looked confused. No. What is that? It's a benzoazepine sedative. It goes by the brand name Valium among others. She has enough in her system to suggest she took at least 10 milligrams. Possibly more. That's impossible, Robert said firmly. Caroline doesn't take anything like that. There must be a mistake. There's no mistake, sir. The test is very clear. Dylan finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Could someone have given it to her? Maybe. Slipped it into her drink. My heart stopped. The doctor frowned. That's certainly possible, though I can't say how likely. Do you have any reason to believe someone would do that? No, Robert said quickly. Of course not. There must be another explanation. But Dylan was looking at me now. Really, looking at me. Lori, he said slowly. You were at the head table. Did you see anyone near Mom's class? The room went silent. Everyone was staring at me. My mouth went dry. This was it. The moment where I either told the truth or lived with the lie forever. Actually, I heard myself say I saw Caroline near my glass. The words hung in the air like a bomb. What? Dylan stood up. What are you talking about? My hands were shaking, so hard I had to clasp them together. Before the toasts, I saw her standing at the head table. She was hovering over the champagne glasses. Robert's face turned red. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what I saw. You're saying Caroline drugged herself? Robert's voice was rising. That's absurd. No. I forced myself to meet Dylan's eyes. I'm saying she put something in my glass, and then I switched them. The silence that followed was deafening. Dylan stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You switched them? I saw her put something in my champagne, a white pill. She dropped it in and walked away. I didn't know what it was or what it would do, but I knew it wasn't meant to help me. So, I switched our glasses. She drank from mine. I drank from hers. That's ridiculous, Robert shouted. Caroline would never. She would, I said, my voice stronger now. She's hated me from the beginning. She never wanted Dylan to marry me. This was her way of stopping it. By drugging you at your own wedding. Andrew spoke up for the first time, his voice shaking. That's insane, is it? I looked around at all of them. Think about it. What was supposed to happen to me if I drunk that champagne? I would have acted exactly like she did, making a fool of myself, ruining the reception, embarrassing Dylan. Maybe he would have been so horrified he'd have the marriage annulled, or at the very least, I'd be humiliated and she'd have destroyed the wedding she never wanted to happen in the first place. Dylan was shaking his head. No, my mother wouldn't do that. You're wrong. I know what I saw. You saw her standing near some champagne glasses. That doesn't mean I saw her drop a pill into my glass. I was shouting now and I didn't care. I watched her look around to make sure no one was watching. I saw her do it deliberately, and then I watched her walk away with this satisfied little smile like she just accomplished something. You're lying. Dylan's voice was cold. You're making this up because you feel guilty about what happened. That hit me like a slap. Guilty about what? I didn't do anything. You admitted you switched the glasses. If what you're saying is even true. You deliberately let my mother poison herself. She was trying to poison me. Enough. Robert roared. I won't stand here and listen to you slander my wife while she's lying in that A hospital bed. The doctor cleared his throat awkwardly. Perhaps this is a coming conversation better had privately. Mrs. Ashford is going to need to stay overnight for observation. We'll run more tests in the morning. If you believe there was some kind of foul play involved, you should probably contact the police. Police? The word sent a chill through me. That won't be necessary, Robert said stiffly. There's clearly been some kind of misunderstanding. But Dylan was looking at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Doubt? Suspicion. Did you really see her? He asked quietly. Yes, I whispered. Dylan, I swear to you, I saw her put something in my drink. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the war happening inside him. His mother, his new wife. Who did he believe? Finally, he looked away. I need to think. I can't do this, right now. He walked away down the hospital corridor, leaving me standing there in my ruined wedding dress, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. I didn't sleep that night. Julia took me back to my apartment. The one I'd been planning to move out of, since Dylan and I were supposed to leave for our honeymoon to Italy the next morning. Instead, I sat on my couch in sweatpants and one of Dylan's old faux college t-shirts, staring at my phone. The videos had already gone viral. Mother of groom has epic meltdown at wedding reception. Read one headline. The video had been viewed over 2 million times. I watched it once, my stomach turning, seeing Caroline dance wildly, destroy our cake, collapse in a pile of frosting and flowers. The comments were brutal. Some people thought it was Billiken, funny. Others speculated about drugs or alcohol. A few armchair psychologists suggested mental illness. No one suspected the truth. Dylan hadn't called, hadn't texted. Muffing. Julia sat beside me, her arm around my shoulders. He'll come around once he has time to process. He'll realize you are telling the truth. What if he doesn't? My voice cracked. What if he never believes me? Then you'll deal with it. But Lori, are you absolutely sure about what you saw? I mean, it was a stressful day. Lots going on. I know what I saw. I turned to look at her. I'm not crazy, Julia. Caroline put something in my champagne. She tried to drug me. Julia squeezed my hand. Hey, I believe you. So, what do we do about it? I don't know. But the answer came the next morning, when Detective Lisa Martinez showed up at my door. She was in her 40s, sharpied with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She showed me her badge and asked if she could come in. Mrs. Ashford, she said, and the name felt strange since I'd been Lori Winters for most of my life, and had only been in Ashford for about 12 hours. I need to ask you some questions about last night's incident. I let her in, my wet heart pounding. Did something happen? Is Caroline okay? She's stable, but the hospital is required to report certain things, and a case of apparent poisoning at a public event is one of them. Detective Martinez sat down, pulling out a notebook. I understand you made a statement suggesting your mother-in-law attempted to drug you. Yes. I sat across from her, forcing myself to stay calm. I saw her put something in my champagne glass, so I switched our glasses. Can you walk me through exactly what you saw? I did, describing every detail I could remember. The detective took careful notes, asking questions, pushing for specifics. Did anyone else see this happen? She asked. I don't think so. She made sure she was alone. I see. She tapped her pen against her notebook. And why do you think she would do this? She never wanted Dylan to marry me. She made that clear from the beginning. Clear? How? I told her about the 2 years of cold treatment. The cutting comments, the attempts to control the wedding planning, that sounded petty as I said it out loud. Not like evidence of someone capable of drugging their new wife. Daughter-in-law. Has she ever done anything physically harmful before? No, but she's always been very calculated, very concerned with appearances and control. Detective Martinez made more notes. The reception was held at the Rosewood estate, correct? Yes. They'll have security cameras. I'm going to need to review that footage. My heart leaped. There are cameras in a great venue like that. Absolutely. They'll have coverage of the ballroom, including the head area. She stood. Mrs. Ashford, I want you to know that making false accusations is a serious matter. If you're not telling the truth, I said firmly. I know what I saw. Then the cameras will prove it. After she left, I felt a strange mix of terror and relief. There was footage. It would show what Caroline did. Dylan would have to believe me. Unless the cameras hadn't caught it. Unless the angle was wrong or the footage was unclear or my phone rang. I answered so fast I nearly dropped it. Hello, Lori. His voice was flat, emotionless. The police just left the hospital. They questioned my mother. Dylan, I mean the hospital, called them. Not me. She says she didn't do it. She says she would never do something like that. Of course, she says that she's not going to admit she's my mother, Lori. I've known her my entire life. You think you know her better, after 2 years. I know what I saw. The police are getting the security footage from the venue. They said they'll review it and contact us. Good. Then you'll see, I'm telling the truth. There was a long pause. I'm staying at Thomas's place for a few days. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. What? I just need space to figure this out, Dylan. We just got married. We're supposed to be on our honeymoon right now. Well, we're not. His voice cracked slightly. My mother is in the hospital, our wedding reception is all over the internet, and my wife is accusing my mother of trying to poison her. So, no, Lori. We're not on our honeymoon. Tears burned in my eyes. I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this. Neither did I. He was quiet for a moment. I'll call you when I hear about the footage. He hung up. I sat there, holding my phone, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. Julia came and held me while I sobbed. The call came 3 days later. Detective Martinez asked me to come to the police station. Dylan was already there when I arrived along with Robert and surprisingly Andrew. We sat in a small conference room. The detective set up a laptop. I've reviewed the security footage from the Rosewood estate, she said. I'm going to show you what I found. She pressed play. The video showed the head table from a slightly elevated angle. The timestamp showed it was about 10 minutes before the toasts were scheduled to start. The table was empty, champagne glasses arranged in a neat row. Then Caroline walked into frame. I heard Dylan inhale sharply beside me. We watched as Caroline approached the table, glancing around nervously. She reached into her small clutch purse and pulled something out. Something too small to make out clearly on the video. Then she held her hand over the champagne glasses, leaning close to read the place cards. Her hand hovered over the third glass from the left, the one marked with my name. Her fingers opened. A small white object fell into the glass. Caroline glanced around again, then quickly walked away. The timestamp showed 2 minutes passing. Then I entered the frame, walking to the head table. I stood there for a moment, clearly looking at the glasses. Then my hand reached out. I watched myself switch the glasses, putting mine where Caroline's had been and hers where mine had been. Then I walked away. The video stopped. The room was silent. Dylan's face had gone completely white. That's not Robert started. Then stopped. She must have thought it was her own glass. She must have been confused about where she was sitting. Mr. Ashford, Detective Martinez said gently, you can see your wife checking the place cards. She knew exactly which glass was which. Then it wasn't drugs. Maybe it was a vitamin or something for herself. The toxicology report from the hospital confirms your wife ingested approximately 15 milligrams of diazepam. That's not a vitamin. Andrew's voice was small. Mom doesn't. We have a detective. Martinez said. We traced it. Caroline's sister, Jennifer Whitmore, has a prescription for diazepam for anxiety. She reported that her pill bottle had been at Caroline's house for the past week while she was visiting. When we asked her to check it, she found that 5 pills were missing. Robert's hands were shaking. This is all circumstantial. Jennifer probably just miscounted. Mr. Ashford. The detective's voice was firm. The evidence is clear. Caroline deliberately put a sedative into her daughter-in-law's champagne glass. The only reason Lori isn't the one who ended up in the hospital is because she witnessed the act and we switched the glasses. Your wife attempted to drug someone at a public event. That's a crime. Dylan stood up, suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He walked to the redder corner of the room and stood there, his back to us, his shoulders shaking. I wanted to go to him to comfort him, but I didn't know if I was allowed anymore. What happens now? Robert asked. His voice defeated. We'll be filing charges, attempted poisoning, reckless endangerment. Caroline will need to turn herself in or we'll issue a warrant for her arrest. She just got out of the hospital yesterday. Robert said she's still weak. She'll be processed and likely released on bail given that she's not a prior record. But Mr. Ashford, this is serious. Your wife could face prison time. The word prison seemed to break something in Dylan. He made a ready tang sound, half sob, half gasp, and pressed his forehead against the wall. I couldn't stand it anymore. I went to him, touching his shoulder gently. Dylan. He turned and looked at me with eyes full of devastation. You were right. She really did it. She really tried to. He couldn't finish the sentence. Instead, he pulled me into his arms and held me so tightly I could barely breathe. I'm sorry, he whispered, into my hair. God, Lori, I'm so sorry. I didn't believe you. It's okay. It's not okay. My mother tried to poison you, and I accused you of lying. I held him while he cried, feeling my own tears fall. Relief and heartbreak mixed together until I couldn't tell them apart. Robert had left the room at some point. Andrew sat at the table, staring at his hands, looking lost. What do I do? Dylan asked me, his voice breaking. She's my mother, but she tried to hurt you. She tried to ruin our wedding to give in it, drug you, too. He pulled back, looking at me with horror. What if you hadn't seen her? What if you drunk it? But I didn't. I switched the glasses. I'm fine. You could have been the one in the hospital humiliated in front of everyone, with videos of you all over the internet. Everyone would have thought you were drunk or high or crazy, and it would have followed you forever. Your teaching job, your reputation, everything. I hadn't let myself think about that. But he was right. If I drunk that champagne, my life would have been destroyed. Caroline had been willing to destroy me to keep me away from her son. The rage I felt in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Caroline turned herself in the next morning, accompanied by an hand. I watched it on the news. Caroline dressed in a conservative navy suit. Her hair, perfect. Her makeup understated. Walking into the police station with her head held high. She looked like she was going to a charity luncheon, not being arrested for attempted poisoning. Caroline Ashford, prominent socialite and philanthropist, surrendered to authorities this morning in connection with an alleged poisoning attempt at her son's wedding reception. The news anchor said. Sources say Ashford allegedly placed a prescription sedative in her new daughter-in-law's drink, intending to cause impairment or harm. They showed clips from the viral video of Caroline destroying the wedding cake. Then they showed our engagement photo. Dylan and me smiling and happy with no idea what was coming. Dylan sat beside me on the couch, watching the coverage in silence. He'd moved back in 2 days ago, bringing his suitcase from Thomas's place, apologizing over and over. They're making her look like a victim, I said, watching Caroline dab at her eyes with a tissue as she entered the station. That's what Huxley does, Dylan said bitterly. He's a shark. Dad hired the best defense attorney in the state. Of course he did. Caroline was processed and released on $50,000 bail within 3 hours. The conditions included no contact with me, which was fine by me. I never wanted to see her again. But the media circus was just beginning. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters had found my number somehow, calling at all hours, asking for interviews. They showed up at my school, trying to get comments from my colleagues and students. My principal called me in for a meeting. Lori, Mrs. Henderson said, her expression sympathetic but worried. I'm going to suggest you take a leave of absence until this blows over. A leave of absence. But I haven't done anything wrong. I know that. But the media attention is disrupting the school. We've had reporters in the parking lot, parents calling with concerns. It's not fair to you or the students. So, I was put on paid leave, essentially suspended from the job I loved because my mother-in-law had tried to poison me. The injustice of it made me want to scream. Meanwhile, Caroline's lawyer was already working the press. He gave an interview on a local news station. My client is a devoted mother who has never been in trouble with the law. Huxley said smoothly. She has spent her life doing charitable work, supporting her community, raising 2 wonderful sons. This accusation is based on grainy security footage that could be interpreted in many ways, and the testimony of a young woman who frankly may have her own motivations for wanting to damage Mrs. Ashford's reputation. Are you suggesting the daughter-in-law is lying? The reporter asked. I'm suggesting there are many possible explanations for what happened that night, and my client deserves the presumption of innocence. I threw a pillow at the TV. Dylan caught it before it hit the screen. He's just doing his job. His job is to make me look like a liar. Lori, no. Your mother tried to poison me. There's video evidence, there's toxicology evidence. Her own sister confirmed the missing pills and he's on TV suggesting I made it all up. I know it's not fair, but this is how the legal system works. Then, the system is broken. I knew I was shouting at the wrong person. Dylan wasn't the enemy, but he was the only target I had access to. He pulled me into his arms, and I cried angry tears into his pinched shoulder. We're going to get through this, he whispered. I promise. But I wasn't sure I believed him. The preliminary hearing was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, I had to watch my name get dragged through the mud on social media and gossip sites. Gold digger accuses rich Immel to get sympathy. Teacher claims mother-in-law tried to poison her. But is she telling the truth? Never met. Had strong opinions about whether I was lying. My social media accounts were flooded with messages, some supportive, but many accusing me of making it up for attention. I deleted all my accounts. It was the only way to stay sane. My mother came over every day bringing food, offering support. My father wanted to hire a lawyer to sue Caroline for everything she had. Emma was ready to go on every talk show that would have her to defend me, but I just wanted it to be over. The only bright spot was that Dylan believed me now completely. He'd watched the security footage a dozen times, trying to make sense of how his mother could do something like this. She always had this thing about control, he said one night as we lay in bed, unable to sleep. Growing up, everything had to be perfect. The perfect house. The perfect family. The perfect reputation. Dad's family had money and she wanted to fit in with that world so badly. Andrew and I were like accessories to her perfect life. That's sad, I said. It is, but it doesn't excuse what she did to you. He rolled over to look at me in the darkness. I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't seen her. If you drunk that champagne, I know, you would have been humiliated, possibly hurt. And I would have thought you were drunk or sick or his voice broke. I might have blamed you. I might have thought you'd ruined our wedding on purpose or something. Dylan, don't. She almost succeeded in destroying us. If you hadn't switched those glasses, if she'd gotten away with it, I might have believed whatever story she told me, that you were unstable or had a drinking problem or anything. She would have poisoned you and your reputation at the same time. The thought made me cold. But she didn't succeed, I said firmly. I saw her. I switched the glasses. And now, everyone knows what she did. Everyone, except the people who matter to her, Dylan said bitterly. Half her country club friends are standing by her saying, it's all a misunderstanding, that you must have been mistaken, that Caroline would never let them believe what they want. My dad filed for divorce. I sat up. What? This morning Andrew told me Dad's lawyer served her with papers. I didn't know what to feel about that. Robert had always been cold and distant, but I'd assumed he'd stand by his wife. Why? Because he finally sees her for what she is, and because he humiliated. The Ashford name means everything to him, and she dragged it through the mud. She made them a joke on the internet. So, he's abandoning her. She tried to poison his daughter-in-law. Yeah, he's abandoning her. I lay back, down processing this. How's Andrew handling it? Not well. He's angry at Mom for what she did. But she's still his mother. And now his parents are getting divorced. His family is falling apart, and he's starting college in the fall, with all of this hanging over him. None of this is his fault. I know. I told him he can stay with us anytime. That we're still family no matter what. Family. Despite everything, we were still married, still together. Caroline had failed. The preliminary hearing was a formality. The judge reviewed the evidence, the security footage, the toxicology reports, Jennifer's testimony about the missing pills, and ruled that there was sufficient cause to proceed to trial. Caroline pleaded not guilty. Of course, she did. Her lawyer argued that the footage was unclear. That Caroline had been confused about which glass was which, that she'd been taking the sedative herself for stress and accidentally dropped it in the wrong glass. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Amanda Cameron, demolished that argument. If Mrs. Ashford was taking the sedative for her own stress, why didn't she have a prescription? Why did she take it from her sister's bottle? And why, if it was an accident, did she never warn anyone? She had multiple opportunities to say, oh, I accidentally dropped my medication in that glass. But she didn't. She stayed silent and let her daughter-in-law sit down to drink from it. The judge set a trial date for 3 months away. 3 more months of living in limbo. I went back to work. thankful to have something to focus on besides the case. My students were sweet, avoiding the subject though. I caught them whispering sometimes. Their parents were less kind. At parent-teacher conferences, I got looks ranging from pity to suspicion. One mother actually asked me, "So, did it really happen the way they say?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled tightly and said, "The evidence speaks for itself." At home, Dylan and I tried to build some kind of normal life. We never did go on our honeymoon. It felt wrong to go to Italy and pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. Instead, we stayed in my small apartment talking late into night, trying to process everything that had happened. "Tell me about your childhood," I said. One night, "Tell me if there were signs I should have seen." Dylan was quiet for a long time. There were always signs. I just didn't recognize them for what they were. Mom was obsessive about perfection. If Andrew or I got less than an A, she'd lose it. Not yelling, she never yelled, but this cold disappointment that was somehow worse. When I was 12, I came home with a B in math, and she didn't speak to me for 3 days. That's abuse? Dylan. I know that now. Way back then, I just thought it was normal. That's how mothers were. He sighed. And she controlled everything. What we wore, what activities we did, who we were friends with. In high school, I wanted to join the theater program, but she said it wasn't appropriate for an Ashford. So, I played tennis instead, because that's what country club kids did. What about your dad? He was never around, always working or at the club, traveling. Mom ran the household and he just let her. I don't think he paid attention to what she was doing to us. And when you started dating me, Dylan smiled sadly. That was the first time I ever really stood up to her. She made it clear. You weren't what she pictured for me. Too ordinary, she said. Too middle class. Not from the right family. She actually said that. Not in those words, but yeah, she kept introducing me to daughters of her friends. Women from good families with trust funds and society connections. She couldn't understand why I wanted to be with a public school teacher from a normal family. I'm sorry. Don't be. You're the best thing that ever made for myself. He kissed me then, soft and sweet. And in a moment I could almost forget about the trial looming over us. But it was always there. A dark cloud we couldn't escape. As the trial date approached, I was called to meet with the prosecutor multiple times. Amanda Cameron was thorough, preparing me for every possible angle the defense might take. They're going to try to paint you as vindictive, she warned. As someone who had a grudge against Caroline and saw an opportunity to get revenge, but I didn't. I never did anything to her. I know. But Huxley is good at creating doubt. He'll point out that you switched the glasses deliberately. He'll suggest you knew exactly what would happen and wanted to humiliate her. I switched them because I didn't want to be drugged, which is completely reasonable, but he's going to twist it. So, when you're on the stand, stay calm. Answer only what's asked. Don't get defensive or emotional. No matter what he says. It was good advice, but I didn't know if I could follow it. The trial began on a cold Monday in Plest, November. The courthouse was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and Caroline's society friends, all dressed in their expensive clothes, shooting daggers at me with their eyes. I wore a simple navy dress and minimal jewelry. Amanda had advised me to look professional, but not flashy. You're a teacher, a normal working woman who was victimized by someone with money and power. We want the jury to see that. The jury was selected over 2 days. 7 women, 5 men, ranging from their 20 seconds to their 60 seconds. I tried to read their faces to guess which ones believed me and which ones didn't. But they were all carefully neutral. Caroline sat at the defense table in a pale pink suit, looking small and fragile. Huxley had clearly coached her. She dabbed at her eyes periodically, playing the part of the wrongly accused. Made me sick. Amanda's opening statement was strong. She laid out the facts clearly. Caroline had motive. She didn't approve of the Rhine marriage means access to her sisters, pills and opportunity. The window of time at the reception when the head table was unattended. The security footage showed her deliberate actions. The toxicology proved what substance was involved. This was not an accident, Amanda told the jury. This was a calculated attempt to drug and humiliate a young woman on what should have been the happiest day of her life. And the only reason Caroline Ashford is the one who suffered the consequences is because Lori Winter saw what she was doing and protected herself. Huxley's opening statement painted a very different picture. Caroline Ashford is a loving mother, a devoted wife, a pillar of her community. She has spent decades doing charity work, supporting local causes, raising 2 successful sons. She has no criminal record, no history of violence or erratic behavior. And yet, expected to believe that this woman on her son's wedding day suddenly decided to poison her new daughter-in-law. He shook his head. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is built on assumptions and misinterpretations. You will see that the evidence is far less clear than the prosecution suggests. The first witness was the DJ from our wedding. He testified about the timeline of events, confirming when the toasts were scheduled and when they actually happened. Then came the catering manager, who explained how the champagne glasses had been set up and when. Then Jennifer Whitmore, Caroline's sister. She looked uncomfortable on the stand, avoiding eye contact with Caroline. Amanda led her through the testimony, gently. You have a prescription for diazepam, is that correct? Yes, for anxiety. And where was that prescription bottle in the week leading up to the wedding? I was visiting Caroline, staying at her house. I kept my medications in the guest bathroom. And when did you discover pills were missing? When the police asked me to check, I counted, and 5 pills were gone. Is it possible you miscounted or took them yourself and forgot? I'm very careful about my medications. I track every dose. Huxley's cross-examination was gentle but pointed. Miss Whitmore, you testified you were staying at your sister's house. How many people had access to that bathroom? Just me. It was the guest suite and the door locked. Well, no. But so, anyone in the house could have accessed your medication, the cleaning staff. For instance, Caroline doesn't have live-in staff, just a weekly cleaning service, and they weren't there that week. What about visitors? Did anyone else come to the house? Jennifer hesitated. Dylan visited a few times and Andrew was living there. Huxley seized on this. So, Caroline's sons had access to your medication as well, I suppose. But thank you, Miss Whitmore. No further questions. I saw what he was doing, planting the seed that someone else could have taken the pills. But it might work on a jury. The next day, they called me to the stand. My hands were shaking as I swore to tell the truth. Amanda smiled at me, encouragingly. Miss Winters, or should I say, Mrs. Ashford? Lori is fine. Lori, can you tell us about your relationship with the defendant before the wedding? I took a breath and told the truth about the medical to him. Caroline's coldness, her subtle undermining, her clear disapproval. I tried to keep my voice steady and factual. Did she ever explicitly tell you she didn't want you to marry her, son? Not in those words, but she made it clear how she would suggest he was too young to settle down. She'd introduced him to other women. She tried to take over our wedding planning and change everything to her vision. She excluded me from family events. Small things but constant. And on your wedding day, what did you see at the reception? This was it. The crucial testimony. I described seeing Caroline at the head table, watching her drop the pill, making the decision to switch the glasses. Amanda had me go through it twice, making sure every detail was clear. Then it was Huxley's turn. He stood buttoning his expensive suit jacket and smiled at me. It wasn't a friendly smile, Mrs. Ashford. You testified that you saw your mother-in-law drop something into your champagne glass, correct? Yes. And you immediately knew it was a drug. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I knew it wasn't supposed to be there. But you didn't know it was dangerous. Why else would she be sneaking pills into my drink? Perhaps it wasn't for you at all. Perhaps, as the defense has suggested, she was confused about which glass was hers, and was taking her own medication. She doesn't have a prescription for diazepam. As far as you know, you're not privy to all of her medical information, are you? No. But, and you testified that you switched the glasses. That was a deliberate choice on your part. Yes. To protect myself, or to set up Caroline Ashford to create a situation where she would be embarrassed in front of hundreds of people knowing exactly what would happen when she drank from that glass. No. I didn't know what would happen. I just didn't want to drink whatever she'd put in my glass. But you let her drink it instead. You stood by and watched your mother-in-law consume what you believed was a dangerous substance. I struggled for words. I didn't think about it like that. I just reacted. You reacted by deliberately switching the glasses and then saying nothing. You didn't warn her. You didn't warn anyone. You just watched. Doesn't that seem cruel, Mrs. Ashford? She was trying to poison me, allegedly. Or, perhaps you saw an opportunity to get rid of a mother-in-law you admittedly didn't like. To humiliate her so badly that she'd be ruined and you'd have your husband all to yourself. That's not true. Tears were streaming down my face now and I hated myself for it. Amanda had told me not to get emotional, but I couldn't help it. I just didn't want to and be drugged at my own wedding. No further questions, Huxley said, sitting down, with a satisfied expression. I left the stand feeling like I'd failed, like I played right into his hands. Amanda tried to reassure me during the recess. He did fine. The jury saw that he was attacking you. That'll work in our favor, but I wasn't sure. The next witness was the security expert who'd reviewed the footage. He walked the jury through every frame, zooming in on Caroline's actions, showing clearly that she'd checked the place cards, deliberately chosen my glass, and dropped something into it. In your ad around professional opinion, Amanda asked, was this an accident? No. Her actions were deliberate and purposeful. Huxley tried to poke holes in it, suggesting the footage was too grainy to be certain, but the expert held firm. Then came the toxicologist, explaining exactly what diazepam was, how much Caroline had ingested, and what effects it would have had. At the dose Mrs. Ashford consumed, the effects would include severe impairment, loss of inhibitions, possible hallucinations, and lack of physical coordination. Essentially, she would appear intoxicated and would have little control over her behavior, and if Lori Winters had consumed this dose, she would have experienced the same effects. Possibly worse, actually. Since Mrs. Winters weighs significantly less than Mrs. Ashford. The evidence was damning, but would it be enough? Caroline took the stand on the fourth day of trial. She wore a cream-colored suit and pearls, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup subtle. She looked like everyone's favorite grandmother, not someone accused of attempted poisoning. Huxley led her through her testimony, like a dance they'd rehearsed 100 times. Mrs. Ashford. Did you put diazepam in your daughter-in-law's champagne glass? Absolutely not. Her voice was clear and firm. I would never do such a thing. Then how do you explain the security footage? I was stressed that day. My son was getting married. I was giving a toast and I was taking something for my nerves. I must have been confused about which glass was mine. You were taking diazepam for your nerves? Yes. I'd been feeling anxious about the wedding and my sister had offered me one of her pills to help me get through the day. This was new. Jennifer hadn't testified to that. Why didn't you mention this before? I was embarrassed. I didn't want people to think I couldn't handle the stress. And then when everything happened, when I ended up in the hospital, I was so confused and upset that I couldn't think clearly. It was a good story. On the other side, Richard Hart's suspicious activities, large cash withdrawals with no documentation, meetings with Kurt's shell company, Pinnacle Holdings, emails discussing draining the fund, recordings where Richard explicitly stated he wanted control of that money once we end Nate. Prove she's unfit. This is damning, Gwen said, listening to one of Beverly's recordings through headphones. In it, Richard's voice came through clearly. The fund has $340,000. If I can get Evelyn removed as co-trustee, I can redirect those funds through the foundation restructuring. Kurt's got the paperwork ready. We just need to establish she's not competent to manage it. The video shows you reading the place cards. Mrs. Ashford. That doesn't suggest confusion. That suggests deliberate intent. Caroline's composure cracked slightly. You're twisting everything. Am I? Or am I simply pointing out the inconsistencies in your story? Amanda picked up a tablet showing the security footage again. Let's watch this together, shall we? Here you are, approaching the table. Here you are, pulling something from your purse. Here, you are leaning down to read the place cards. And here she paused the video. Here you are, holding your hand directly over the glass marked Lori. The glass that was not where you would be sitting, the glass that belonged to your daughter-in-law. The courtroom was silent. Now, Mrs. Ashford, I'll ask you again, were you confused about which glass was yours? Caroline's face had turned red. I don't remember exactly. Everything is blurry from that day. Convenient that your memory is blurry about this specific moment. But crystal clear about your sister allegedly offering you pills, something she denies. I'm not lying. Then explain to this jury why, if you were taking medication for your own anxiety, you never once mentioned it to the doctors at the hospital. You never told the paramedics, never told the ER physicians who were trying to figure out what was wrong with you. Why? I was disoriented. I just humiliated myself in front of hundreds of people. Humiliated yourself, doing exactly what you intended Lori to do. The only difference is, she saw you, tampering with her drink and protected herself. You drank your own poison, Mrs. Ashford. And now you're asking this jury to believe you're the victim. Objection. Huxley was on his feet. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge said. Miss Cameron, rephrased. But the damage was done. I could see it on the jurors' faces. Some of them were looking at Caroline with disgust. Amanda Preston. Mrs. Ashford, you've built a reputation in this community as a pillar of society. You chair charity boards. You host fundraisers. You move in the best social circles. Isn't it true that Lori Winters didn't fit into that world? I don't know what you mean. Isn't it true that you disapproved of your son's choice to marry a public school teacher from a middle-class family? I wanted my son to be happy. That's not what I asked. Did you approve of his choice? Caroline's jaw tightened. I thought he was young. I thought he had options. Options meaning women from wealthier families. Women with the right pedigree. I wanted him to be sure enough, that you were willing to sabotage his wedding, to drug his bride, to risk her health and safety just to prove she wasn't good enough? No, Caroline's voice rose, her careful composure finally shattering. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted my son back. She took him from me. Everything was fine before her. And then, she came along, and suddenly I wasn't good enough anymore. Dylan chose her, over me, over his own mother. And I just wanted. She stopped abruptly, her hand flying to her mouth as she realized what she'd said. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Huxley's face had gone pale. Amanda smiled. No further questions, Your Honor. Caroline was escorted from the stand, her face buried in her hands. As she passed the defense table, I heard her sobbing. I should have felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt sad. This woman had thrown away everything, her reputation, her family, her freedom, because she couldn't let go of her son. The closing arguments were powerful on both sides. But the outcome felt inevitable. After Caroline's outburst, the jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, I was sitting between Dylan and my mother, holding both their hands so tightly, my fingers off. On the charge of attempted poisoning, how do you find guilty? On the charge of reckless endangerment, how do you find guilty? The courtroom exploded in noise. I heard Caroline sobbing loudly. Robert sat stone-faced in the gallery. Andrew had his head in his hands. Dylan pulled me into his arms, and I finally let myself cry. Not from sadness, but from relief. It was over. Finally, it was over. The sentencing hearing was 2 weeks later. The judge, a stern woman in 60 seconds, named Judge Patricia Morrison, reviewed the case carefully before pronouncing sentence. Mrs. Ashford, you have been convicted of serious crimes. You deliberately endangered another person's health and safety. You violated trust in the most fundamental way. And, perhaps most troubling, you did all of this at a wedding. A celebration that should have been joyous, turning it into a nightmare for your victims. Caroline stood beside Huxley, her shoulders shaking. The prosecution has asked for the maximum sentence of 5 years. The defense has asked for probation and community service, citing your clean